Greetings comic lovers and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old to history to anecdotes to really wherever our whims take us. And today, history, Spider-Woman history, because I can't stop, won't stop. I also listened to some of your comments about the backdrop, which ranged from I like it to but there was no, it's horrible. So that's always a very good thing. But some of you wanted to see more stuff in the back, so I've been working on getting more stuff back there. There was an attempt to get stuff on the other side, but it wouldn't balance and it got real intense. I was trying to get Elle here to sit up and he wouldn't because he's in character. His little legs don't do that. I actually broke into a sweat, so I was like, it's time to stop. I should not be sweating trying to get Elle to sit up, but he's here, so he says hi. Today I wanted to take a look at the hot mess that is the history of Jessica Drew. Now, we already talked about why she was created, which was simple enough, to protect copyright. But the effects that had on her origin and the struggle she had with characterization for years during her entire solo run, really, that's fascinating to me, and it all stems from the start. We've only skimmed over it, but personally, I find it really fascinating, so we're gonna go a little bit deeper. So let's go back in time. Spider-Woman had been created. She debuted in Marvel Spotlight number 32, and the issue sold way better than expected. Initially, she was just supposed to be a one and done, a kinda take that DC, now you can't write a Spider-Woman. Actually, it was now you can't put a Spider-Woman on TV because we have one. Case in point, this comic, and then really shortly afterwards, after a great big promotional push, the TV series. But then there were some decent sales and some interest, and so the mood changed. It became, maybe we could actually make this a thing. But this then meant examining what had been published vis-a-vis her backstory, and taking a look at whether or not they felt it would work with modern audiences. At the time, modern meant that we were done with the Silver Age. We had been out of it since at least 1973, and now we were firmly inside what is referred to as the Bronze Age. What that meant was that some of the cheesier, sillier, campier plots of that era were no longer accepted. There had been a lot of zany scientific creation going on back in the 60s, and not all of that flew anymore. These plots were perceived as being no longer sophisticated enough or believable. So her first origin, where she was a spider turned into a woman by the High Evolutionary, shunned by his other creations, and driven into the arms of Hydra over her confusion over just what she was, and her powers, which killed the first man she ever loved, were re-examined. It was decided that people wouldn't buy that she was a spider who had become a woman. It was just too much of a leap. So some tweaks were made. She would be human with a father who was a scientist obsessed with spiders as the savior of mankind. She would be injected with his spider serum after getting radiation poisoning. Her father would then leave, just cuz, and leave her with the High Evolutionary, who would then continue to experiment upon her. And from there, a lot would remain the same. She still wouldn't fit in with the High Evolutionary's other creations, the New Men, and she would still end up with Hydra and being brainwashed by them. So you could also still keep that pathos of, what am I? But it didn't have quite the same punch as not a spider, but it was still there. Her arc re-establishing her in a 4-story appearance over in Marvel 2-in-1 did well too, and introduced her to Marv Wolfman, who would also be her series writer, for 8 issues, that is. At the start, everything looked okay. Spider-Woman was selling pretty well. But Wolfman would later admit that he had no idea what to do with her or what direction to take her in, that she'd kind of just been dumped upon him in a way. Even though when he left, he would cite workload. What he would do while he was working on her would be to establish a dark tone, to try and take her as far away from Spider-Man as possible. She would fight the supernatural. She would have this struggle as to what she was, just basically anything to differentiate her. Also, this was an obvious choice for Marvel at the time, since supernatural stories were selling like hotcakes since the lifting of the supernatural creatures ban, and a loosening over scrutiny of the macabre. This happened because by this era, the Comics Code Authority, which had been established in the Silver Age, or actually kind of started the Silver Age, was beginning to loosen its grip. The Comics Code Authority had been the result of the industry self-regulating as a result of the moral panic surrounding comics following the end of World War II and the end of the Golden Age. And in that era, there was a rise of horror and sci-fi comics, and people were concerned that they were leading to deviancy and juvenile delinquency. Still, Wolfman would struggle with many of the same things that certain Marvel fans did. Who was Spider-Woman? Why did she exist? In short, the biggest question, why do we need a Spider-Woman? I feel like Dawn of Justice. Do we need a Superman? We have one. So Wolfman would leave for other projects, and indeed his legendary run on New Teen Titans was just around the corner. That began in 1980. In his place would enter Mark Gruenwald, while artist Carmine Infantino would remain. For now. Mark Gruenwald was, in my opinion, a super cool uber nerd. He got into comics because he had a fanzine that he self-published called Omniverse, and it was all about continuity and canon and why it mattered and how things had to tie together, which is so endearingly nerdy to me. After getting to Marvel, he would begin instantly working on an official Marvel handbook, even though they hadn't asked him to. But he would start it and it would be a project that would come to fruition eventually, and they still publish those handbooks. Hooray! His encyclopedic knowledge of what his colleagues called trivial details would allow him to rise in the ranks and eventually become an editor. And while he would quit this position to go back to writing, which he preferred, many still consider him to be one of the best editors they ever had because he remembered absolutely everything. Was that guy wearing a t-shirt or a sweater? Ask Mark. Why does this matter? Well, this matters because it means when he got onto Spider-Woman, at the time still a newcomer, he decided that he was gonna maintain what had been set up by Wolfman. He was gonna keep that tone, he was gonna keep everything, he was just gonna expand it and solidify it. He was gonna bring things together, he was gonna add some supporting characters, he was just gonna try and build on it, basically. So the tone remained the same, and so the themes. Although they got a little Grunwaldy. He likes to go a little outlandish. I'm a fan. So all this sounds good, right? Well, except for two things. The book was no longer selling, and the cartoon, which was successful and launched during Grunwald's time, bore little resemblance to the comic, and only heightened the negative fan perception that Spider-Woman was just derivative of Spider-Man, especially because she hung out with Spider-Man in the series a decent amount. This was exemplified by the fact that not all the fans knew about the copyright stuff, so it just kind of looked like a cash grab. Like all of a sudden, like, oh, you liked Spider-Man? Well, here's Spider-Woman. I have receipts, aka quotes, my favorite thing. Roger Stern, the editor at the time, stated, "They saw her, and later the She-Hulk, as running a good idea into the ground, much as DC had done in the 60s with its then ever-growing families of super and Bat characters." Shots fired. I like that he can't even give a quote without taking a shot at DC. Distinguished competition, my foot. Well, issue 20 would see the removal of Grunwald. Also Infantino and Stern. Time for an entirely new direction. We're done with it. Puh. And by that I mean they decided it was time to make Jessica like everybody else. The problem was that she was too different. We need her to be the same. Blend into the crowd. This writer was Michael Fleischer, who would later have an interesting lawsuit against Harlan Ellison. No more magic. Jessica was now a bounty hunter with your standard dual life and relationship troubles because being Spider-Woman was a secret. She was also now firmly established as just your own typical vigilante. This would alienate pre-existing fans who said that now they were taking away the things that made Jessica special and unique. This change would also just drop a bunch of her ongoing plots. Like her mentor was missing, Charles Magnus, and they were just like, who cares, he's gone forever, I guess. And now, of course, the book started to get a reputation. Like, why so many writers? Why you trying to force Spider-Woman? Well, we only had to deal with that till issue 32, because then we changed again. Now our writer would be Chris Claremont. He was famed for having revitalized the X-Men in the 70s by completely revamping their roster. In fact, the X-Men only became popular at this point. When they started in the 60s, they were not a popular team. People tend to think they were because of like what they grew to be, but that is largely because of him and how he changed it. Team with Storm and Colossus and Nightcrawler and Wolverine. Not the original lineup. Not even close. Now Jessica was a bounty hunter no more. No, now she was a private investigator. Again, a motivational and tonal shift. Also, of course, since he was known for the X-Men would appear. She would have team-ups and meet the X-Men. It was a thing. But Claremont would only stay for 13 issues. Then him and the artist would leave. Art changes matter too. It can completely change the tone. Even if the writer stays the same, if you really like the art and then the art style completely changes, I'm not gonna lie, I've stopped reading things because of that. Have you? Let me know down below. By this point, enough was enough with the higher-ups editorial, and they decided that they were canceling this book at issue 50. It was over. We tried. It's done. It's been 2 years, people. But then, who should return but Grunwald, this time as the editor. And he decided that the series needed to go back to its roots, to what was working with fans in the first place, the people who had stuck with it the entire time. So he decided to do what he did best. look at the continuity. He was gonna tie it all back together. So he decided to pick up the drop plots and also take a chance on some newcomers, Ann Nocenti as a writer and Brian Postman for pencils. This was actually Ann's first regular comic book assignment, and she decided that she was gonna go hard or go home. And Grunwald backed her, so together they decided that in issue 50 they were gonna kill off Spider-Woman. She had a rationale. Her rationale was, these are licensed characters and you want them to have a forever life. At the same time, they live in a violent world, and occasionally you feel like someone has to die. Otherwise, it's too unreal. This was super poorly received with fans who felt like they were being slapped in the face. Yes, it wrapped up all of Spider-Woman's plots, but it also killed her. Like, thanks for sticking with us and giving us all your money. We appreciate your 35 cents, but turn around so we can kick you. Grunwald and Nocenti would regret this decision, especially after they saw the response. So Grunwald would actually have Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, brought back to life less than a year later. This would occur in Avengers number 240 and 241 in 1984. Here's the thing. Not only was Jessica Drew's solo run all over the place, but it kind of put her in a bit of a limbo because of everything that went on with it. Future writers just weren't sure what to do with her or where to put her, where did she belong. That had never been dealt with during the entire 50-issue run. So you would have other characters emerge who would take on the mantle, some related to her, some not. You had the villainous Charlotte Witter, who stole her powers. You had her kind of protege Maddie Franklin. You had the unrelated Julia Carpenter. Jessica would only find her footing again in the 2000s, specifically 2005, under writer Brian Michael Bendis, who would then kind of assume I know all the things there are to know about Spider-Woman. Ask me how she speaks. Ask me what she likes to eat. I know all the things. She has a British accent now because I said so. I mean, incredibly she could, but also there was the whole Hydra brainwashing thing for her to blend in. I just feel like some humility when it's not a character that you created, you know? But that's just me and probably my salt about some of the more recent Bendis things. Superman doesn't need a secret identity. She would be included as a core member of the New Avengers, and this would breathe new life into her. It would also firmly establish her connection to other heroes. This was something that had been started in her solo series but hadn't fully crystallized. However, it would turn out that during this run, she was a Skrull. Bendis claims he planned this from the beginning. You can go back to issue 1 and see hints. Now you know why the Spider-Woman series didn't happen. We thought about doing it and having her revealed as a Skrull in the first issue of her series. I wrote it, but in the end, I just thought it wasn't selling somebody what they thought you were selling them. Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you can see hints of a character being off for a character that has only been used sporadically since 1984. I mean, I guess if they do something really sketch in the issue, like phone home, but at the same time, that's expecting a pretty hardcore level of like Jessica following. Like, I follow Jessica Drew and I know what she would and wouldn't do. For a lot of people, this could have been their first encounter with Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, because again, there were other Spider-Woman at this point. So expecting them to be able to tell that she wasn't herself might have been a bit of a lot. I don't know. However, after this, she would appear consistently. The real Jessica would take down her Skrull counterpart and be seen amongst the Avengers all the time. It must be noted that Bendis would do an entire redo of her origin. From huge things like her now getting her powers in the womb after being hit by a laser beam full of different DNA traits, including spiders, also bye-bye High Evolutionary. Instead, this is all Jessica's parents. And even though Wundagore is involved, the connection is tenuous. Jessica's parents also mysteriously vanish, and she would then be recruited to Hydra, who it turned out had been funding her father's research. Also, her father worked with Miles Warren, aka the Jackal from the Spider-Man clone saga, so we're tying her a bit closer to the Spider-Man mythos. Oh, and little things like her mom's name is Miriam, now with an I rather than Miriam with an E, and she was trained and mentored by the Taskmaster. Her next big arc would be the Dennis Hopeless one, the pregnant arc. Hopeless has been praised for his female perspective, and a lot of feminist critics really enjoy this book. I am but one woman, and women are not a monolith. We all have different opinions and different experiences. So let me take a personal moment to say, as someone who has been pregnant and is currently very pregnant, that there was a lot about this run that rubbed me the wrong way. a lot. But again, that is just me. We all have different relationships with works for many reasons. If you love this arc and it brought you something that really stuck with you, or you think it's really important to see, then keep loving it. Whatever makes you love comics, keep loving it. There are parts of it that I did enjoy, but on the whole, most of it just wasn't for me. I also hate being told that something is accurately representing the female perspective or the perspective of motherhood, as if there is only one perspective or only one correct perspective, and this comic has done it. We found the one perspective. Don't tell me how to feel, Marvel, because you don't know me. After this, Jessica would kind of go back to being a bit more of a support character again. But she has a new #1 as of 2020, so we'll see what happens with her. Spider-Woman is now an established part of Marvel canon, but it took her a while to get there because of how abruptly and unceremoniously she was dumped into it. Still, for me, I am glad there is a Spider-Woman. Well, Jessica Drew, as much of a mess as a lot of her history has been. I think she brings something unique to the table. I'm glad for the stuff I read with her, at least. I also like Julia Carpenter a lot too. Another useless fact about me you don't need to know. In these universes though, people have gotta get their own names. If I was a superhero, or more realistically a supervillain, I would want my own name. And anybody who took my name would pay. They would pay the ultimate price. It's my name. Mine. I can hear my cat running around. Yes, I have a cat. See, I'm already ready for supervillainy. It's a Siamese cat too. Extra evil. So that was just a little history and overview of Jessica Drew, because I'm on a Jessica Drew kick. And I will be for whoever knows how long, and then I'll be off of it. Do you guys get like that? You just read or binge read a certain character or arc, and then you're done. You're like, it's time for the next thing that I'm binge reading. If you have any other characters you'd like to know a little bit more about, let me know down below. I'm also gonna get some padding for this room, so it should be less echoey next time. This is official. I love this new setup. I think it can be seen in the fact that I just feel like I have so much more energy. It's largely because now I'm in a secret area, so my daughter can't hear me, so I can be loud. Loud and proud. Anyway, that's enough of that. Thanks so much for watching, commenting, casually comicsing. It's always fun for me. I hope it's fun for you too, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.